Talking politics, cats and dogs. Talking politics, cats and dogs. Talking politics, cats and dogs. Cats and dogs.
In my last video, I expected to do a deep dive on the Center for Research on Education Outcomes. I examined their 2015 study on cyber charter schools, which honestly seemed like a hit piece. I wanted to look into the organization because even though it was tied to Stanford University, research is really difficult to fund, and lobbying groups are the most eager people to give out funding. But when I looked into the diversity of their studies, I found that not only did they not have a consistent agenda, but their most recent studies reversed their opinion in charter schools. They do seem to be a legitimate research organization that has a goal of figuring out what works. So was I completely off base to criticize them? Well, no. I think they did a bad job categorizing their data. It's possible to be sincere and wrong at the same time, and I feel like that applies to that study. The criticisms I applied to the 2015 study probably apply to studies that I would agree with. So I feel like I'm pretty unbiased in those criticisms. But looking into this, I found a much larger problem, and it's one I would have found sooner if I just listened to my own children. All the data from schools comes from standardized testing, of which the average student takes 112 standardized tests, K through 12. And the rewards for a good test don't even benefit the student. The reward is more money for the school or a good review for the teachers. These tests are completely separate from the student passing or failing a class. So the main thing the students are getting out of this situation is a lot of stress. In fact, most schools will pass a student for social reasons. So a student has to be really, really behind to fail. Now, while people object to charter schools making money for their shareholders, the fact that this standardized testing is mostly done by for-profit companies is often not part of the conversation. Continuous testing comes from the No Child Left Behind Act, passed in 2002, and the Common Core Educational Initiative from 2010, so many people just assume these tests are put together by the government. However, McGraw-Hill and NCS Pearson are publicly traded companies. Hardcore Educational Measurements went private last year in agreement with Veritas Capital, and Riverside Publishing, which is also known as Riverside Insight, is also private and has one institutional investor, which is Alpine Investors. In the last 12 months, we've spent over $790,000 on NCS Pearson. And while I couldn't get an exact number for the other three companies, it's estimated that over $1.7 billion is spent on this industry every year in the United States. Tests not only cost a massive amount of money, they take an emotional and physical toll on students too. Watching interviews with teachers, the one that resonated with me the most is the teacher said that she felt the test devalued the students who had talents outside of math or reading. Indeed, many schools have slashed programs for art and music because those take time and money away from prepping students for the test. From the number of social media posts that show young people performing or creating physical art, it's clear creativity is very valued in the younger generation, but there's just no place for it in the school system. There's another issue that gets deprioritized in order for schools to focus on state testing. Well, my state, Pennsylvania, says on its Department of Education website that K through 12 students must be provided with planned instruction that is aligned with academic standards in health and physical education, and schools provide sufficient time in order for students to achieve proficient levels on the Pennsylvania academic standards in health, safety, and physical education. However, the state doesn't give guidance on how many minutes or times per week and leaves all the responsibility of the assessment up to the local schools. Statistically, this isn't working out because from 2012 to 2022, only two counties, Cambria and Columbia, saw their obesity rates fall by 1 point. Allegheny County remained the same at 29%, and everyone else got fatter. COVID was probably a factor that escalated this, but the overall trend was happening before 2020. Pennsylvania's overall obesity rate is 33%. Well, that makes me feel better about the weight I need to lose. It's not great for the overall health and productivity of the state, and it doesn't sound like the students are coming out of their educational experience with proficiency in physical education and health at all. Are these tests worth the huge price tag? In my opinion, no. They have the effect of making our education system more limited by focusing on just math or reading. I'm a person who enjoyed reading a lot as a teenager, and none of the things I enjoyed reading would have been part of the testing because no one who writes these tests is cool enough to put in a section about horror or Dragonland. There are many students who become engaged in their education for the sake of their electives, and that should be okay. There are plenty of trade jobs and artistic professions that pay extremely well. One of my friends from college is an animator, and the average salary for an animator is $83,000. So I know you can be an artistic person and still get paid, and that shouldn't be institutionally discouraged. But let me know what you think in the comments. And if all this has made you mad about how your tax dollars are being spent, call your senator or representative and let them know too. Don't forget to register to vote in case they don't listen. I'll see you in the next video.